Hey guys, tonight we drift into a story that blooms slowly, petal by petal, note by note, under the moonlight of ancient Persia. You stand now in a garden in Shiraz, its walls thick with climbing jasmine, the breeze soft as a whispered poem. The stars are scattered above like spilled sugar, and beneath them, the scent of rose oil weaves into the air as naturally as breath. Cypress trees loom like watchful sentinels, and somewhere in the thicket, a single nightingale begins to sing. Not randomly. Oh no. She's perched right where the gardener wants her. And her song? That's no accident either. You inhale deeply, and it's not just flowers. You're breathing in centuries of secrets. These gardens were never just for strolling. They were designed for devotion, reflection, and perhaps, whisper it, a little manipulation. You're about to learn how Persian gardeners didn't just grow flowers. They grew music. Through tricks of scent, space, shadow, and sound, they encouraged wild nightingales to return, linger, and, some claim, sing more sweetly than in any other land. Now, fair warning, you probably won't survive this if you're expecting chaos and carnage. The worst injury here is likely a bee sting, and yet, there's something almost magical about how still, intentional beauty shaped a world. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from far away, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know what time your dreams begin. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The stone beneath your sandals is warm from the day, even though the sun has long dipped behind the mountains. You walk slowly because that's what this place demands. No hurrying here, only the quiet rhythm of feet through gravel and the far-off rustle of pomegranate leaves. You're in a Chahar Bagh, a Persian garden divided into 4 precise quadrants. Each quadrant is a symbol, a mirror of heaven, and all flow toward a central fountain bubbling like it's telling secrets to the stars. Everything here has a purpose. Even the breeze feels scripted. It lifts the scent of the roses just enough to stir something in your chest. A memory, maybe, or a dream. The nightingale sings again, and it's not just beautiful. It's intentional. She sings there because the gardener made it so. Historians still argue whether the gardeners trained nightingales in any strict sense. No whistles, no cages. But records do suggest that bird behavior could be shaped by predictable patterns, just like humans. If a bird returns to a spot and finds perfect cover, sweet nectar, and no threat, guess what? She comes back. If she sings there and hears her song echo sweetly across a marble wall, she might stay a little longer. Do this for generations, and suddenly, nightingales know where the acoustics are best. And you're the lucky one tonight, because you're standing in one of the oldest design environments made not just for eyes, but ears. Persian gardens were acoustic spaces long before that was a buzzword. They knew that a fountain here, a curved stone path there, would carry a song better than open air. One scholar even suggested that curved rose trellises were built partly to bounce nightingale songs towards seated poets sipping tea. Sound designed by scent and stone. But let's step back. Why nightingales? Why this bird? To the Persians, especially the poets, the nightingale was not just a singer. She was the singer. Her voice, layered, improvisational, sorrowful, captured everything from divine love to heartbreak to the ache of separation. That's why her duet with the rose shows up again and again in Persian verse. The rose is the beloved, aloof and thorny. The nightingale, that's you, longing, vulnerable, occasionally loud about your feelings. It's romantic, sure, but also a bit dramatic. Because have you heard a real nightingale? You'd expect a delicate peep, but no, she belts. Loud, clear, acrobatic notes with pauses so precise they feel practiced. You start to wonder if she's rehearsing in the trees when no one's around. And that's where things get eerie. Some 12th century manuscripts suggest that nightingales were encouraged to return to particular gardens with strategic plantings of flowering quince, honeysuckle, and, of course, roses. You start to notice a pattern. Every time the bird sings, it's in a place where the air is thick with bloom. Could it be that the fragrance itself keeps her there? That she Like us, feels calm, even euphoric when wrapped in scent and shadow. One theory, a fringe one, mind you, is that certain flower oils mimic the natural hormones birds release during mating season. The gardeners, with no science to back them, still seem to know that jasmine and musk made things livelier, and the birds responded, or so the stories say. As you move deeper into the garden, stepping over a thin stream that splits into 4 winding rills, you realize this isn't just about plants or birds. It's about crafting an experience, one where the divine, the natural, and the artistic all hum together like strings on a setter. You pass a gardener now, older, skin sun-worn, carrying a curved blade he uses to trim the edges of a damask rosebush. He sees you, nods, and points upward without speaking. The nightingale? She's back, perched exactly where she was an hour ago. And her song? It's a little longer now, a little more complex, as if she's been practicing, or listening, or maybe being listened to. You pause a moment longer under the shadow of the cypress tree, tilting your head just slightly to catch the next trill of the nightingale. Her song floats through the air, not like an accident, but like something placed precisely by unseen hands. You listen again. She sings in spirals, one phrase looping into another, quick pauses, a sudden burst, then silence. It's not unlike jazz. If jazz were performed by a tiny brown-feathered soprano who didn't care what you thought. Now, you might be thinking, birds sing everywhere, don't they? Trees, cities, dusty alleyways. Why make a fuss about this one in this garden? Well, you got a point. But here's where things get weird, in the best way. See, Persian gardeners weren't just throwing seeds and hoping for the best. They were closer to conductors than landscapers. Every rosebush, every water channel, every date palm was planted not just to be pretty, but to do something, to shape airflow, to direct scent, and to encourage, even seduce, birds like this one to come, stay, and sing. Let's rewind a few hundred years. You're now walking through a different garden. This one belongs to a Safavid noble in 17th century Isfahan. The sun is just setting, casting gold across the tiled walls and long reflecting pool. Your sandals slap against the marble as you step into a courtyard flanked by 2 pavilions. The pool mirrors the trees above, and more importantly, it magnifies the sound of every drop that falls into it. A nightingale flits between the quince trees, wings catching the light, and lands just beside a particularly lush stand of narcissus. Now, here's the fun part. Historians still argue whether the layout of these gardens, divided into 4, called Chahar Bagh, was strictly religious, symbolic, or practical. But one thing's clear. Those quadrants created microclimates. One might stay warmer, one might be slightly more humid, one might trap scent longer, and one, just maybe, might become the preferred amphitheater for nightingale performance. You follow a gardener who is carrying a brass bowl filled with rosewater. He walks slowly, methodically, and splashes it along the stone borders of a shaded bench. You catch a whiff, heady, sweet, intense, and realize something else. You're not the only one affected. The bird overhead shivers her wings and begins a new series of chirrups. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe the gardeners figured out what perfumers and psychologists would discover centuries later. That scent doesn't just trigger memories. It can influence emotion. And for a territorial, high-strung bird like the nightingale, a comforting, familiar scent might be enough to say, "This is home." Quaint, sure, but not without support. There are scattered notes in Persian garden manuals. Yes, those existed, suggesting that certain floral species were planted together not just for color harmony, but because they bloomed at night. Think about that. A flower that opens in the dark, releasing its perfume when the rest of the world sleeps. Sounds suspiciously like an invitation. Not to you, but to the creatures of the dusk. Moths, beetles, and yes, birds. Now, you might roll your eyes here. After all, how do you train a wild nightingale? Well, it's not about training the way we think of it. No leashes or rewards. Instead, imagine it more like suggestion, persuasion, a kind of passive choreography. You don't force the bird to come. You just make your space so enticing, so perfect, that she decides to come back on her own. Again and again, year after year. There's even a fringe theory. And please take this one with a strong pinch of rose petal salt, that some gardeners carried tiny flutes tuned to mimic nightingale notes. The idea being that if a bird heard a version of her own song echoed back, she might linger, respond, or even improve her phrasing. Like vocal training for birds. Most historians scoff at this, but one obscure text mentions a gardener musician named Bahram who spoke to the birds nightly in silver breath. You don't get more poetic than that. The idea isn't so far-fetched when you remember this. Persian culture, especially under the Safavids and early Qajars, placed enormous value on the relationship between nature and art. Gardens weren't separate from poetry. They were poetry. The layout, the sounds, the textures. Every element was crafted like a stanza. And in that metaphor, the nightingale was the punctuation, the final note that made the verse complete. So when a gardener encouraged a nightingale to sing near a blooming rose arch, it wasn't just landscaping. It was curating emotion. You pass another bench now, low and wide, carved from cool stone. On its side is an inscription, faint with age. The garden is the page, the bird the ink. It makes you stop, because suddenly this whole place feels less like a physical space and more like a living manuscript, written in petals, sung in feathers. You settle onto the bench, listening. The night is fuller now. Not darker, exactly, but thicker. The garden breathes with you. Water trickles from a lionhead spout into a tiled basin. Somewhere near the almonds, a cricket joins the song. And still, the nightingale trills. Is she louder? Or are you simply more attuned? Here's something else you probably didn't expect. These gardens weren't private. Not always. Some were built for rulers, yes, but many were semi-public, used for gatherings, poetry readings, even quiet reflection. They were civic sanctuaries. And their caretakers? Artists as much as botanists. These gardeners would memorize entire poems, reciting them aloud while pruning. Why? Some believed the sound of human voice kept pests away. Others, more romantically, claimed the birds enjoyed it, that the nightingale sang sweeter when she heard a ghazal. Still, not all agreed on the method. Some early garden treatises suggest burning bundles of dried herbs like lavender, myrtle, and saffron near the trees in the evening, not just for scent, but to soften the air for creatures of song. Did it work? Who knows? Historians still argue whether these rituals had real effects or were just poetic superstition. But in a culture where poetry could shape policy and gardens could influence music, superstition wasn't a flaw. It was part of the design. You rub your fingers against the edge of the bench. Smooth, cool, time-worn, just like the traditions you're walking through. And suddenly, you realize you're not in a museum. You're in a performance. The whole space, this garden, is an open-air theater. The stage is floral. The lighting is lunar. And the star performer is tiny, feathered, and utterly unaware of her fame. A breeze stirs. You smell jasmine, layered now with the deep musk of blooming lilies. The nightingale shifts. 1 foot forward, head cocked. She releases a sudden, sharp phrase, 3 descending notes, quick pause, and a rising trill so clean it could cut glass. You blink. Is it just your imagination, or is she reacting to the perfume? And night after night, the nightingale answered. Another gardener. You've lost count of how many steps past with a woven tray. On it, bits of ripe fig, pieces of soaked date, a shallow bowl of water infused with rose. It's not for people. It's placed gently, almost reverently, beneath a specific tree, one that leans slightly over the eastern corner of the garden. The same corner, you realize, where the nightingale seems to favor her song. Coincidence again? You're starting to wonder. Because in the end, Persian gardeners may not have trained birds like soldiers, but they did something more powerful. They created a space so perfectly balanced, so in tune with instinct, memory, and desire, that even the wildest creatures couldn't help but respond. Not because they were forced, but because the garden itself was an invitation. You're still on the bench, fingers absently tracing the weathered stone, when the next note rises. It's different now, softer, slower, more deliberate. The nightingale seems to have taken a breath, like she's aware of her audience and wants to pace herself. Or maybe, just maybe, the changing scent of the garden has shifted her mood. You inhale deeply. That's definitely orange blossom. Sweet. Citrusy. Just sharp enough to remind you. This isn't a dream. But here's the strange part. And brace yourself, because this might be your favorite twist, yet some Persian gardeners believe certain flowers could teach birds how to sing. Not metaphorically. Literally. Picture a long row of irises, deep indigo and violet, opening slowly in the dusk. Some ancient garden texts describe these blooms as song-holding petals. A weird phrase, right? But think about it. When the wind blows across a bed of tall-stemmed flowers, it whistles. It hums. Sometimes it even clicks against the leaves. Now imagine a bird, a young one maybe, perched nearby. What does she hear? 100 tiny, natural instruments. A breeze-made orchestra. This isn't fantasy. Modern researchers have shown that birds raised in silent environments often develop simpler, less varied songs. So the theory that the right environment could shape a nightingale's vocal style isn't as outlandish as it sounds. Historians still argue whether the Safavid gardeners truly understood this principle, or if they stumbled into it while trying to impress the Crown Prince's Poetry Club. Either way, the results speak for themselves. Or rather, sing. You stand, finally. The stone bench has left faint ridges in the backs of your legs, but you barely notice. The garden calls forward now, down a gravel path, through a shaded arcade, toward another section of this living labyrinth. You pass a low wall covered in grapevine, the fruit dangling in half shadow like tiny chandeliers. And there, just ahead, a rectangular terrace overlooking a shallow sunken basin. The sound here is different, more echo, more ripple. You realize you've entered what old Persian garden manuals sometimes called the listening quarter. Now that name might sound poetic, but the layout is very real. These were sections of the garden specifically designed to amplify natural sounds. Water, wind, wings. The walls were just far enough apart to create gentle echoes. The plants were chosen for the rustle of their leaves. Even the stone underfoot had a purpose, rough enough to crunch slightly when you walked. So nothing, not even your own footfall, was silent. You pause, close your eyes, and listen. Not just hear, listen. There's that trickling water again, lapping gently from an unseen channel. Leaves flutter like silk scarves. Somewhere to the left, a pair of doves murmur back and forth. And above all, above everything, the nightingale begins again, this time slower, as if savoring the acoustics. You step into the space fully now. Beneath your feet, the stones are carved with faint floral patterns. You wonder how many generations have walked here. How many gardeners, singers, lovers, mystics. The scent changes again, this time to chamomile and crushed mint. A little wild, a little sharp. You're not sure if it's meant to wake you up or calm you down. Either way, it works. Here's a weird little tidbit you probably didn't see coming. Some Qajar-era texts mention flower harmonics. The idea that certain plants, when placed together, not only complemented each other in smell and color, but in sound. As in, the way wind moved through them. A whisper here, a rattle there, a dry hiss over there. Combined, they made natural music beds for birds to sing over. Kind of like laying down a beat and waiting for the soloist to riff on top. Too bizarre? Maybe. But again, nature loves rhythm. And birds, especially songbirds like the nightingale, are hypersensitive to auditory environments. A garden built to sound like music might very well invite musical guests. And those guests, they didn't just perform for free. They became part of the garden's identity. So much so that some aristocrats hired scribes to document which nightingales visited when they sang and what flowers were blooming at the time. Imagine that. A kind of avian concert review, filed alongside records of weather and lunar phase. You crouch now by the edge of the basin. The water is so clear you can see tiny fish weaving between pebbles. A few floating petals drift past. Roses, mostly, but also something paler. You lean closer. Jasmine, night blooming, probably placed here for exactly this reason. The breeze picks up again. It carries with it a low murmur. Not a bird, not a fountain. You realize it's a person, an old man, tucked behind a stand of cypress, muttering softly. You approach slowly, careful not to interrupt. His robe is simple, dusted with pollen. His hands rest in his lap, palms up, as if receiving something. And around him, Dozens of clay pots, each one holding a different plant. He sees you and smiles, says nothing, then gestures to sit. You do. For a while, there's just silence between you, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the occasional chirp. Then he begins to speak, low, rhythmic, half to you, half to the garden. They learn from the wind, he says, and from the roses, especially the old ones, the thick-headed kind that bloom only once a year. Those are the best teachers. You nod, unsure if this is metaphor or botany, but it doesn't matter. The trick, he continues, is to never make the garden too perfect. You must leave something undone. A wild patch, a crooked path, a flower past bloom. That's where the bird goes. That's where she feels safe. You glance at the nearest planter. Sure enough, the plant is scraggly, leaves uneven, petals beginning to curl, and above it, a nightingale perches. Maybe he's right. He pours tea into 2 chip cups and hands you one. It smells like dried lemon and basil. You sip. It's oddly refreshing, and somehow bitter in a way that makes you want more. Then he points to the wall behind you. Faintly carved in the plaster is a verse. You squint to read. The rose teaches silence. The nightingale turns it into song. He smiles again, says nothing more, and you understand. It's time to move on. You rise, thank him with a nod, and continue down the garden's eastern path. The air here is heavier now, more floral, richer. You're entering what was once the perfume court, a place where, it's said, nightingales lingered longest. Because here, the blooms were densest. Wild roses, gardenia, almond blossom, and the walls were just close enough to hold in every note of their music. As you pass beneath a carved stone arch, the garden opens again, and this time, there are no benches, no tiles, just grass, tall, unkempt, swaying in waves. You stop, listen. The nightingale is here too, but her song has changed. Now she's whispering, just a few notes, separated by long pauses, as if testing the space, or perhaps waiting for an answer. And maybe that's what this whole garden is, a conversation, between stone and flower, between scent and sound, between human and bird. You walk slower now, letting the rhythm of your steps match the call of the bird. And somewhere behind you, the gardener pours another cup of tea. Another jasmine opens. Another nightingale begins. You drift deeper into the garden now, shoes forgotten, feet sinking softly into moss-covered stones. It's darker here, not gloomy, but thick like velvet. The moon filters through tall trees, dappling the path with light that dances as the branches sway. You've reached what the old Persian manuals called the shadow throat, a section so shaded and lush, it was believed to echo with hidden songs. And sure enough, there she is again, the nightingale. Her song feels different now, slower, deeper, like she's plumbing the bottom of her voice. This part of the garden must be her favorite rehearsal hall. But why here? Turns out, this shaded patch may have been the most deliberate part of the entire garden. See, Persian gardeners were more than plant enthusiasts. They were choreographers. Every flower bed, every tree, every brick was placed with both beauty and function in mind. And when it came to training nightingales, shade wasn't just about comfort. It was about acoustics. You glance up. The tree canopy is thick with sycamores and silk trees. Their leaves absorb just enough sound to keep things intimate. Like a whisper chamber, the nightingale can hear herself clearly here. She's not trying to compete with fountains or wind gusts. This is her mirror room, her practice booth, and maybe her confessional. Let's unpack that, because you're going to love this twist. Some mystics in ancient Persia believed nightingales didn't just sing, they confessed. Yep, like little feathered monks. Each song, they said, was an offering, not to the gods exactly, but to the rose. Now that might sound sweetly poetic or utterly deranged, depending on your caffeine intake, but it runs deep in Persian literature. The rose is not just a flower. It's the flower, the unattainable, the beloved, and the nightingale, the hopeless lover. So every time she sings, she's not showing off. She's pleading, love me, notice me, don't bloom and vanish without hearing my heart. And here's where it gets deliciously weird. Some historical accounts claim that nightingales sang more passionately in the presence of particular rose species, especially the damask rose, the soft pink ones with layers like cake frosting. Historians still argue whether this was a romantic projection or a real biological response. One theory is that the scent compounds in roses could stimulate birds neurologically, much like they do humans. Another theory, the thorns. No, seriously. One 18th century gardener wrote that nightingales preferred thornier rose bushes for nesting, not for protection, but because the tension of being so close to pain amplified their song. Like an opera singer channeling heartbreak. You chuckle softly. A dramatic bird. Of course. You reach out and touch one of the nearby rose bushes. Its petals are impossibly soft, like breath, if breath were velvet. But those thorns? Brutal. No wonder the bird gets emotional. And then another memory hits you. Not yours, but planted by countless poems. The image of a nightingale impaled on a rose thorn, singing even as she bleeds. A metaphor, sure, but the idea is everywhere in Persian verse. The beloved is beautiful but dangerous. The lover sings, even if it costs him everything. But not all gardeners were poets. Some were, well, bird nerds. There are obscure scrolls, found mostly in provincial libraries, that detail a practice called note-catching. It sounds adorable, but don't get too cozy. This was serious business. Gardeners would mimic bird calls using carved flutes or reed pipes, trying to coax nightingales into responding with their own variations. It was a kind of duet, human and bird. And guess what? These human mimics weren't always men. Some of the most skilled bird voicers were women, gardeners' daughters, harem singers, even queens. They'd sit behind silk screens or in high balconies, playing their notes into the wind like questions. And if a nightingale answered, that was good luck, or at the very least, good music. You pass under a wooden trellis now, dripping with wisteria. The purple blossoms glow faintly in the moonlight, and their scent is thick, almost too much, like perfume left open overnight. Somewhere in the branches above, a small flutter. Not the nightingale this time, but something else. A bat, maybe, or a dove on the night shift. But your ears are tuned to a different frequency now. You start to notice the pauses between the nightingale's phrases, the little silences. And in those silences, the garden seems to breathe. That's when it hits you. The whole place is composed, like music. And indeed, some ancient texts describe the layout of gardens in musical terms. The north-south path is the melody line, the water channels, harmonies, the trees, percussion. The birds, of course, are the soloists. Even the flowers play their part. There's one especially fringe theory that deserves mention here. Some early 20th century scholars, deep in their chai-fueled dissertations, argued that Persian gardeners selected flower colors to match specific musical scales. Wild, right? For example, yellows for sharp notes, reds for deep bass, pinks for halftones. The garden became a visual score, one you could walk through and hear without a single instrument. Did this really happen? Probably not on purpose. But when your entire culture sees poetry in every petal, maybe synesthesia isn't so far-fetched. You slow your steps again, letting the moment expand. The path ahead splits. One way leads toward a citrus grove, the other toward a dry hillside dotted with poppies and low lavender. Both seem equally mysterious, but your gut says lavender. It's quieter there. And, if the old records are to be believed, it was in the lavender sections where nightingales were born. Yup, baby birds, nests. Lavender, you see, repels snakes. And snakes are bird nest nightmares. So smart gardeners lined certain areas with lavender hedges, almost like cradles. The scent was strong enough to deter predators, but gentle enough not to disturb the birds. And there, in those protected pockets, young nightingales learn to sing. There's a Persian phrase for this, ghazaldam, literally, the breath before a poem. It refers to that quiet moment when a bird, just on the edge of maturity, lets out her first full, clean note. Not a chirp, a song, a debut. And it was sacred. Old records mention entire families gathering quietly at dusk, just to catch a young nightingale's first performance. No clapping, no whistles, just reverent listening. You reach a small clearing, ringed in, yep, lavender. The plants are thick and knee-high, brushing against your shins as you walk. You imagine this is what walking through violet fog would feel like. You sit down carefully, disturbing nothing, and close your eyes. Then it happens. A single note. Clear. Bright. nervous. Then another, slightly more confident. You smile. Somewhere nearby, a young bird is finding her voice. And as her notes string together into something like melody, you realize you've just witnessed what ancient Persians spent lifetimes trying to preserve. The moment nature composes itself. And you didn't even need a flute. You lie back, hands behind your head, eyes to the stars barely visible through the treetops. The nightingale sings. The garden answers. And the story, her story, keeps unfolding. You stretch slightly, neck cracking, as if the lavender bed beneath you has become your personal recliner. Somewhere between the young nightingale's shy lullabies and the moon's languid drift overhead, you forgot that time exists. That's the thing about Persian gardens. They were never meant to be rushed. Every path is a detour. Every leaf, a suggestion to pause. And now, the path wants to show you something older. Stranger, you rise and head toward the citrus grove, guided not by light or sound, but by a smell so sharp and clean it almost stings. Bitter orange blossoms. They hit your nose like a polite slap. Not aggressive, just confident. And you remember now that Persian gardens weren't just for the eyes and ears. They were full-body experiences. A feast of senses. And citrus. Citrus was the secret handshake. Here's the funny part. These weren't your average snackable oranges. These were bitter oranges, also known as Seville oranges or naranj in Persian. Not exactly pleasant to bite into unless you enjoy puckering so hard your soul leave your body. But their flowers? Divine. It wasn't just aesthetics. Bitter orange groves served a serious role in nightingale training. Why? Well, scent memory, for starters. Persian gardeners believed that young birds who grew up surrounded by a particular scent would be calmer and more musical when exposed to it later. Like an olfactory lullaby. It's why citrus trees were planted near nightingale hatch zones. Later, when a bird flew to a new garden and caught a whiff of those blossoms, boom, instant comfort zone. Fringe theory alert. Some mystics claimed that the scent of citrus flowers could influence the pitch of a bird's song. They even tried tuning their gardens by mixing floral species in precise combinations, like DJs with orchids. Historians still argue whether these experiments were based on results or just wishful sniffing. You pass under the first orange tree, ducking to avoid a low branch heavy with waxy leaves and unripe fruit. The ground beneath is dotted with fallen petals, each one glowing faintly in the moonlight like spilled pearls. And suddenly, you're not just walking anymore, you're eavesdropping. Because now, you hear them. Not just one bird, but several. Their songs weave together like a jazz trio, loose but attentive. There's the lead nightingale again, bold and acrobatic. But now she's joined by two others. Softer, shyer, still learning. This is a bird jam session. And, in the Persian tradition, this was where the real training happened. Not in cages, not in isolation, but right here, within the intricate mess of a garden symphony. Gardeners knew this. They used it. They even had a term for it. Zambaria, the hive of song. The idea was simple. Bring together multiple birds in an environment rich with familiar smells, soft echoes, and ample perches. Then let peer pressure do the rest. You smirk. Turns out even nightingales aren't immune to the she sang it better effect. But there's a twist here, a slightly eerie one. Some records suggest that certain gardens were so acoustically perfect, so emotionally tuned, that birds would mimic each other's mistakes. Not just melodies, not just rhythms, but actual vocal stumbles. A broken trill here, a lopsided phrase there, as if the garden captured imperfections like fingerprints. It's debated, of course. Some ornithologists say it's nonsense. Others whisper about ghost notes, odd little anomalies in nightingale songs that appear only in particular groves. One especially haunted spot in Shiraz was famous for birds that seemed to sing slightly out of tune, but all together, so the disharmony became intentional. You pause beneath a larger tree and listen. There, a tiny crack in the melody. Not a mistake, a choice. And it happens again, like a musical wink. You're in the middle of an avian inside joke. And while you're chuckling quietly at this sonic mischief, you notice something. An old wooden bench, covered in lichen, nearly sunken into the earth. It's the kind of bench that's absorbed decades of whispered poems and late-night heartbreaks. You sit, This, the elders believed, was the final stage of training. Not for the bird, but for you. Because what good is a song if no one listens? So they built benches, listening stations, quiet spots where people were encouraged not to watch the birds, but to feel them. Let their songs do something unspeakable, and hopefully unnameable. You inhale deeply. The air is thick with orange blossoms and something sweeter beneath. Maybe jasmine, maybe just memory. The nightingales are in full swing now, their voices looping and layering like nature's lo-fi playlist. And here comes the historical kicker. There's a 13th century manuscript that describes a curious tradition among some elite Persian households, the Sahar Watch. Every spring, at the peak of nightingale season, one person would be assigned to stay up all night in the garden. Not to protect it, but to document the best song. They'd sit on a bench like this one, wrapped in furs or layered silk, armed with parchment and tea. And when they heard the moment, one particular song that lifted the hair on their arms, they'd record it. Not in notes. Music notation wasn't standardized, but in metaphor. That's how you get entries like, "Tonight, her voice resembled wine being poured into velvet." Or, "She sang of a widow's last dream, soft then gone." You feel a chill, because you've heard it too. That one note, right there. That little stretch of sound that's less about pitch and more about ache. You look down. No parchment. No ink. But if you had to write tonight's song, she sang of someone who stayed too long in the garden and forgot what he came looking for. You blink. Yeah, that tracks. And still, the birds go on. It's worth pausing to note that nightingales don't sing just for mating or territory. Unlike most birds, the males keep singing even after they've paired up. They sing through summer into early autumn, long after the biological need is gone. Scientists call it unresolved vocalization. Poets call it hope. And the gardeners? They call it success. Because if your garden is good enough, peaceful enough, fragrant enough, shaded just right, a nightingale will choose to sing there not just because he must, but because he wants to. And that, dear dreamer, was the whole point. Not to cage a bird, not to force beauty, but to create a place where beauty volunteers itself. That's the magic trick, the sleight of scent, the choreography of shade, the architecture of ache. You lean back on the bench, arms stretched along its curved top. Somewhere behind you, an old irrigation channel hums quietly. It's been there the whole time, carrying water from a spring miles away. The water never rushes. It glides, like silk over skin. And that's your last realization for the night. Everything in this garden, every stone and stalk, is designed not to impress, but to invite. It says, stay, listen, be undone. And so you do. The moon shifts a little higher, or is it lower? Hard to tell anymore. Time in this garden folds like a silk scarf. One moment you're perched on a mossy bench, letting citrus-scented night breathe over your skin. The next you're following another winding path into who knows where. And that's exactly what happens next. You rise again, legs slightly stiff like you've been sitting for centuries. The orange grove thins out, and your feet meet something new. Pebbles. Not just scattered gravel, but an intentional mosaic. Stones of slate, chalk, obsidian, and ochre arranged in wide, winding loops that feel symbolic, like a prayer written in minerals. You're in the Whispering Corridor now. That's not its official name, but it fits. Narrow hedges line both sides, tall enough to hide the moon, but trimmed just enough to let you know you're being guided. A little tunnel of green. And ahead, faintly, that warbling song again. But this time, you're not just following sound. You're following technique. See, by now you know that nightingales weren't trained in any modern sense. No clickers, no treats, just space, repetition, and gardens that nudged rather than ordered. But in this section of the garden, we find the closest thing to a nightingale dojo. A place where the young birds went from random noisemakers to full-blown heartbreak balladeers. The key, echoes. This path you're on, it's a deliberate acoustic chamber. The tightly packed hedges and curved gravel walls reflect and soften sound. When a bird sings here, its song boomerangs gently back at it, slightly delayed. A built-in duet. Gardeners use this to teach rhythm and refinement. A nightingale would hear its own rough sketch and adjust in real time, smoothing edges, refining crescendos. Pretty advanced stuff for a bird with zero access to a Spotify subscription. You walk slower now, almost tiptoeing. Each crunch of gravel underfoot feels too loud, too human. The garden here is quieter, and the birds more precise. It's like moving from a jazz bar to a chamber orchestra. And it's in this acoustic cradle that you hear one of the rarest sounds in the Persian garden world, the countersong. Imagine two nightingales, perched on opposite ends of the hedge corridor. One sings a phrase, bright, rising, hopeful. The other waits, then responds with its mirror, darker, descending, wistful. They volley like this for minutes, sometimes hours, never overlapping, always waiting their turn. Gardeners believe this was the highest form of avian art. Not just noise, not even just music, but conversation. And here's the kicker. These bird duets weren't always spontaneous. Skilled gardeners could pair specific birds whose song patterns matched in tempo or tone. They called them dugol, literally, two flowers. Each garden might have its own legendary duo. Whispers of a pair in Kashan that once sang through a thunderstorm without pause. Another in Tabriz that mimicked the rise and fall of the call to prayer. Fringe tale incoming. One manuscript claims a particularly famous nightingale duo in Isfahan would stop singing the moment any human voice entered the corridor. Total divas. Wouldn't even warm up if you so much as cleared your throat too loud. Historians still argue whether this was just coincidence, or if birds were truly trained to respond to silence as a cue. You stop walking. The path has ended at a small circle, a perfect nook surrounded by stone walls, low enough to sit on, warm from the stored heat of the day. In the center, a shallow fountain, no higher than your shin, filled with water clear enough to mistake for glass. And now you hear it clearly, the countersong. The two birds perched above you don't know you're here. Or maybe they do, and just don't care. Their melody is hypnotic. You sit at the fountain's edge, arms draped over your knees. One bird sings a tumbling waterfall of notes, the kind of sound that makes your chest tighten like you're about to cry. The other waits, then answers. Slower, sadder, like a love letter written after it was too late. This is when it hits you. The garden isn't training the birds. The birds are training the garden. Because after weeks, months, sometimes years of this ritual singing, the stones around the fountain begin to learn the music. Not literally, of course, they're rocks, not record players, but the shapes and angles begin to reflect sound differently. The more the birds sing, the more the space evolves to suit them. Acoustic memory, baked in a limestone and moss. The gardeners knew. Oh, they knew. That's why many Persian gardens were never finished. They were always in a state of becoming. A wall moved slightly, a tree trimmed, a hedge widened, all to accommodate the evolving vocal needs of their avian residents. Talk about responsive design. And just to add one more thread to this feathered tapestry, nightingales are notorious improvisers. Unlike parrots or mockingbirds who mimic external sounds, nightingales remix their own material. They play with rhythm, volume, even silence. One bird in the garden's records once paused between notes for a full 11 seconds, long enough for the gardener listening to assume he'd flown away, then dropped a high trill that made the whole hedge tremble. You blink slowly. 11 seconds of quiet. That's gutsy. A mainstream historical gem for your collection. In 17th century Persia, some upper-class households would host private song nights, where guests would sit in garden alcoves blindfolded. Yes, blindfolded. And try to guess whether the voice they heard was human or nightingale. Winners got sweet pastries. Losers got existential crises. Imagine being bested in vocal beauty by a bird the size of a tangerine. And yes, you guessed it. Some humans try to cheat the game by learning to mimic nightingale trills themselves. There are whole texts dedicated to the art of balbally, bird singing. Some men trained for months to master the precise throat flick needed to fake a midnight call. Historians still argue whether the best of them ever fooled the birds themselves. You chuckle. The fountain gurgles beside you, a soft, irregular heartbeat. The birds above continue their back and forth, their duet less competitive now, more cooperative, like old friends finishing each other's sentences. And somewhere in the branches above, you think you hear the lead female again. Remember her? The bold soloist from the citrus grove? She's not singing right now, just listening, maybe even learning. Which brings us to one last secret whispered only in the most patient corners of Persian gardens. Sometimes, the most skilled nightingales were the quietest. The ones who didn't jump into every melody. The ones who waited, took notes, practiced. And then, one night, when the moon was just right, and the air held that weird mix of damp earth and jasmine, they'd sing once. Just once. And change the whole shape of the garden forever. You sit in silence now, half hoping that moment will happen here. That a single note might split the night open like a ripe fig. But for now, it's just water and stone and two birds gently teaching each other how to ache. And you, still learning how to listen. The quiet hum of the garden at night carries a certain magic, doesn't it? You might be starting to feel it now. How time seems to stretch, fold, and settle like soft sand beneath your feet. In the gentle dark, with nightingales weaving their delicate songs through the orange trees and cypress shadows, there's a particular corner you've yet to explore. One that holds some of the more surprising secrets of these gardens, and the gardeners who nurtured these feathered musicians. You rise from the fountain's edge reluctantly, your limbs still damp with evening's coolness, and follow a narrow path veined with blue-green tiles. The tiles are glazed with the faintest crackle, their edges worn from centuries of footsteps, human and otherwise. The air here smells of rosewater and crushed mint, a subtle perfume that lingers like a whispered invitation. Ahead lies the nursery, not for trees or flowers, but for the nightingales themselves. You might be surprised to hear this. After all, birds raise their own young, right? But Persian gardeners took an extraordinary interest in every stage of their songbirds' lives, from egg to master singer. In this nursery, baby nightingales were carefully reared in enclosures filled with the softest grasses and twigs, nestled beneath protective lattices that kept the curious cats and hawks at bay. The nursery was less about forced training and more about immersive environmental conditioning. The little ones, or balbalak as the Persians affectionately called them, grew up surrounded by the aromas of blooming jasmine and the muted rhythms of their elders' evening serenades. Here, sound wasn't just heard, it was absorbed, breathed, and imitated long before the first solo note. Gardeners knew that a nightingale's vocal talent was partially inherited, yes, but even more shaped by its early surroundings. Like a human child learning language by listening to family chatter, young nightingales picked up not only the melodies, but the emotional nuances embedded in the garden soundscape. Each chirp and trill echoed the mood of the night, the rustle of leaves, the distant laughter of humans sipping sherbet by tiled fountains. The fascinating part, some scholars suggest that gardeners would deliberately introduce guest singers to the nursery, birds brought from other regions with distinct dialects or unusual song patterns. This cultural exchange added a richer palette to the young nightingale's repertoires, much like a kid exposed to different languages early in life. The nursery became a kind of avian conservatory, nurturing not just the species but a whole spectrum of birdsong traditions. One particularly quirky custom involved introducing subtle scents to the nursery environment, hints of violet, saffron, or almond blossoms, to see if olfactory stimuli influenced the bird's vocal expressions. It's the kind of thing that makes you wonder if ancient Persian gardeners were early pioneers of multisensory training. Historians still argue whether these scent experiments had any measurable effect, or if they were simply charming rituals to honor the garden's sacredness. You crouch beside a small enclosure fashioned from woven willow branches. Inside, a clutch of fluffy fledglings blinks up at you with bright eyes, their feathers still soft as down and their tiny beaks trembling with nervous excitement. They emit tentative chirps like baby laughter, occasionally bursting in a brief burst of song. It's an adorable, chaotic symphony. Nearby, an elderly gardener tends to the enclosure, his hands steady as he sprinkles water over fresh fig leaves laid out as bedding. He hums softly, matching the rhythm of the fledglings' calls, a gentle human counterpart to their songs. It's almost a duet, and you realize this delicate interaction is itself a form of training. The birds learn from the human voice as much as from their own kind. Here's a mainstream historical nugget for your relaxation library. Persian royal courts often kept nightingale nurseries on palace grounds. These weren't merely hobbyist endeavors, but highly valued centers of culture, where the most talented fledglings might eventually be gifted to nobles, poets, or scholars. The nightingale song was more than decoration. It was considered a symbol of spiritual longing and poetic inspiration. And if you think all this bird-raising sounds too genteel, there's a quirky twist. Some accounts describe gardeners using musical mirrors, polished copper discs positioned in the nursery, to reflect the young birds' images back at themselves. The idea was that seeing their reflection might stimulate more vigorous singing, as if each fledgling were performing for an invisible audience. Imagine the surprise of a tiny nightingale suddenly confronted with a flashy, chirping bird that wouldn't respond or fly away. Some fledglings apparently got so fascinated they'd spend hours in front of these mirrors, practicing their calls with added enthusiasm. Others, more suspicious, would ignore the shiny imposter altogether. Historians still argue whether these mirrors really influenced vocal development, or were more symbolic props tied to garden folklore. It's hard to imagine modern bird trainers pulling out a mirror and calling it a day. But hey, these were gardens of poetry and mystery, where science and superstition dance side by side. You take a slow breath and trace your fingers along a low wall covered in creeping ivy. You think about the early training rituals, so natural, so woven into the garden's rhythms, and the high art of the acoustic corridors you just left. This nursery, with its scents, reflections, and nurturing hums, is the quiet beginning of every nightingale's story. Speaking of stories, there's an old Persian legend about a nightingale born in a garden nursery who sang a single note so pure it caused a nearby rose to bloom out of season. The gardeners took this as a sign of great things to come, and, of course, made sure to protect that fledgling with extra care. You can't help but smile. Maybe it's the softness of the night or the slow drip of water from a nearby fountain, but the idea of a bird's song making roses bloom feels just right. And that's the beauty of these gardens. Their stories ripple outward, like the notes from a nightingale's throat, touching stone and leaf and human heart alike. You stand, preparing to leave the nursery behind. A breeze stirs the jasmine petals above, and you catch the faintest hint of someone humming a melody. Human or bird, you're not quite sure. Maybe the line is meant to blur here. As you walk away, you carry a new thought, that in Persian gardens, training a nightingale wasn't about domination or control. It was about harmony, about giving a bird the right space, the right company, and a little magical encouragement to become itself. After all, if the garden's purpose was to help both birds and humans find peace, then the nursery was where that journey quietly began. The night deepens around you as you leave the soft, lively nursery behind, stepping onto a pathway lined with pomegranate trees. Their fruit hangs like little lanterns glowing faintly in the moonlight, casting shadows that dance on the cool earth. You can almost taste the sweet tartness in the air. And just as the scent of ripe pomegranate settles in your senses, you find yourself approaching the heart of the training ritual, the sacred song sessions. You've already seen how Persian gardeners created an immersive world for their nightingales. But it's here, in these carefully orchestrated gatherings, that the magic truly unfolds. The gardeners believed that nightingales didn't just sing to fill the air with melody. They sang to express moods, to tell stories, and even to mimic the rhythms of the garden itself. Picture this: a semicircle of stone benches surrounding a small, sunken pool filled with clear water, reflecting the stars above. The gardeners gather here each evening, long after the heat of the day has faded, carrying instruments, flower bouquets, and carefully prepared treats for their feathered companions. The air is thick with anticipation, and the nightingales are eager participants in what feels like a secret, nightly ceremony. The main event is the call and response. The gardeners sing or play gentle tunes, using flutes, lutes, or simple wooden pipes, and the nightingales respond with their own improvisations. It's a subtle interplay of melody and timing, a conversation between human and bird. You might think of it as a very slow, very polite jam session, except the musicians have feathers and wings. The gardeners would often begin with a simple, repetitive phrase, like a musical question. The nightingales answered back, sometimes matching the tune exactly, sometimes improvising new flourishes that added complexity. It's mesmerizing to imagine sitting there, eyes half closed, drifting as the birds take turns shaping the night's soundtrack. There's an unexpectedly cozy humor in the ritual, too. Some gardeners like to tease the birds by deliberately playing slightly wrong notes or offbeat rhythms, watching the nightingales struggle to adjust their songs. Imagine a musician playing chicken scratch on purpose and seeing how the band reacts. Some nightingales seemed quite particular about their set list and would flatly refuse to sing until the tune was correct. Historians still argue whether the nightingales understood these games as playful or were simply adapting out of survival instinct. The idea that birds could appreciate musical humor may sound a bit fanciful, but there's growing evidence today that many bird species do enjoy engaging with human rhythms and tones beyond simple mimicry. Another layer to these sessions was the use of flower bouquets as cues for the nightingales. You're probably wondering how flowers fit into bird training. Here's the charming part. Gardeners believe that different flowers could influence the mood or tone of the nightingale song. Bluebells were thought to inspire soft, melancholy melodies, while roses coaxed more passionate, vibrant trills. Before a session began, a gardener would wave a specific bouquet near the bird's cage or perch, signaling what kind of song they wanted to hear. It was a botanical version of a conductor's baton, guiding the performance with color and scent. You might find this surprising, but Persian gardeners saw the nightingale's song as an expression of emotional states linked to nature's own cycles: joy, longing, renewal. The flowers weren't just decorative, they were part of the language. Some scholars believe this practice had roots in the Sufi tradition, where the nightingale is a symbol of the soul's yearning for the divine. Now, you're probably wondering how the birds learned to associate specific flowers with specific song styles. It wasn't an overnight feat, the training was gradual, starting with small associations like bluebell scent means soft notes. The gardeners patiently rewarded the birds with food treats or gentle strokes when they responded appropriately. Here's a curious tidbit. One garden keeper's journal from the Safavid era mentions an experiment with jasmine and lavender scents. The jasmine supposedly inspired particularly long and complex songs, while lavender seemed to calm especially excitable birds. Some birds reportedly refused to sing altogether without their favorite flowers nearby. Quite the diva behavior, if you ask me. The gardeners themselves had to develop a finely tuned sense of timing, mood, and subtlety. The sessions weren't about loud or flashy performances, but about gentle persuasion and mutual respect. You can almost hear their whispers in the garden's quiet corners. Let's try this one more time, just a little softer. Another unexpected detail is the use of mirror pools placed near the birds during the sessions. These shallow pools reflected moonlight onto the birds' feathers, sometimes creating shimmering light patterns. The gardeners believed the sparkling reflections encouraged the nightingales to sing more brightly and with greater expression. Whether this was scientific or superstition, it certainly added an enchanting atmosphere to the evening. Of course, there was always the risk of distractions, the rustling of nearby leaves, an overly enthusiastic gardener coughing mid-song, or an unpredictable cat prowling too close. Nightingales could be temperamental performers, and their moods sometimes shifted unpredictably. Some evenings the birds would sing only faintly, as if reluctant to perform, while on other nights their melodies soared, filling the garden with rich, complex harmonies. One particularly amusing account tells of a gardener who trained a nightingale to mimic the sound of a water fountain so precisely that listeners sometimes mistook the bird for the trickling stream itself. This caused confusion, laughter, and occasional water splashes from guests reaching out to touch the sound. Historians still argue about the extent to which nightingales were consciously trained versus naturally gifted and simply encouraged. Was this a true collaborative musical effort? Or did the birds sing out of instinct shaped by routine? We might never know for sure, but either way, the results were undeniably beautiful. As you sit quietly in this imagined garden circle, surrounded by the mingling scents of night-blooming jasmine and honeysuckle, you feel yourself drifting deeper into the gentle cadence of human and bird alike. The nightingale song is not just a sound. It's a conversation with nature, a delicate dance of melody and emotion that invites you to relax and sink into the moment. And that's exactly why these song sessions were so cherished. because they transformed the garden into a living symphony where the boundaries between species and senses blurred, and where every note mattered, not for spectacle, but for serene connection. You lean back on the cool stone bench, letting the music carry you slowly toward rest. The nightingales continue their interplay with the gardener's gentle calls, a peaceful lullaby from centuries past, still echoing in the quiet corners of time. You find yourself wandering deeper into the garden's labyrinth, past softly rustling cypress trees and the delicate shimmer of a marble fountain's gentle trickle. The nightingale songs from the previous gatherings still linger in your ears like a soothing memory, but now you are about to uncover an even more delicate and surprising layer to this ancient practice: the secret rituals surrounding the nightingales' nesting and how the gardeners cared for their tiny pupils beyond song training. Nightingales are known for their elusive nature, nocturnal singers, shy and rarely seen. But the Persian gardeners took a special interest not only in the birds' performances, but in their entire life cycle, especially the nesting period. You step quietly into a secluded alcove where small, carefully woven nests rest gently hidden among fragrant orange blossoms and soft olive leaves. These nests, you learn, were almost sacred spots, the centers of quiet reverence and care. The gardeners developed an intricate knowledge of the nightingale's breeding habits and nesting preferences, learned over centuries through careful observation, and whispered wisdom passed from generation to generation. They knew, for instance, that nightingales preferred dense shrubs near water sources, where the air was cool and the scent of blooming flowers was strongest. But what's truly fascinating is the care they gave to the nests themselves, crafting miniature garden sanctuaries designed to promote healthy development and calm fledglings into peaceful adulthood. You're probably wondering what kind of gardening this involved, given that nests are natural bird homes, not flower beds. Well, here's where the Persian ingenuity shines through. Gardeners sometimes supplemented the natural materials the birds used with carefully chosen petals, soft moss, and aromatic herbs like lavender and thyme. These additions weren't merely decorative. They served multiple purposes. Lavender and thyme are natural insect repellents, which help protect the fragile eggs and hatchlings from pesky invaders like mites and ants. More subtly, the scents were believed to soothe the baby birds, calming their nervous systems and encouraging restful sleep. It's a kind of botanical lullaby woven into the nest itself. You can almost picture the tiny chicks nestled among soft, fragrant petals, breathing in these calming scents as they grow. One of the most curious practices involved the timing of flower placement. Gardeners would carefully add fresh petals at dawn and dusk, times of transition, when the garden shifted from night to day and back again. This ritual echoed the rhythms of the birds' own daily cycles and was thought to reinforce a sense of security and stability. There's a delightful hint of whimsy in how gardeners sometimes arrange petals in symbolic patterns within the nests. Tiny floral spirals or star shapes that, to us, might seem purely ornamental, but were believed to convey blessings or protective energies. This blend of natural science and poetic imagination speaks to the uniquely Persian fusion of artistry and observation. Historians still debate whether these patterns had any measurable effect on the birds' well-being or were purely symbolic gestures. But even today, there's a growing understanding that the environment around a nest, its scent, texture, and visual cues, can influence how well young birds thrive. Meanwhile, the gardeners didn't neglect the adult nightingales, either. They often crafted special perches near the nests, woven with fragrant jasmine vines or adorned with clusters of sweet-smelling apricot blossoms. These perches provided safe resting places where adult birds could observe their surroundings and prepare their songs, surrounded by comforting scents that stimulated their creativity. One particularly charming detail: gardeners noticed that some nightingales had favorite resting spots and would go to great lengths to keep those spots fresh with newly gathered flowers every day. You might imagine a gardener sneaking through the garden at dawn with a small bouquet, whispering apologies if a bird flew off startled. After all, you wouldn't want to upset your star performer's morning routine. The gardeners also took special care to protect the nest from natural predators. This included carefully trimming nearby branches to prevent snakes from slithering too close, and sometimes building small protective screens out of woven reeds. You get the sense this was less about harsh defense and more about gentle encouragement, maintaining a balance where the birds felt safe yet free to come and go as they pleased. There's an amusing report from a 17th century Persian manuscript about a gardener who tried to negotiate with a local mongoose population, leaving offerings of fruit nearby in hopes of deterring them from raiding nests. The plan had mixed success, but it reveals the gardener's patience and inventive spirit. You're probably curious how these close relationships affected the nightingales themselves. Interestingly, some birds appeared to form attachments to specific gardeners, recognizing their voices and even responding with unique calls or personalized songs. It's almost like a friendship, a gentle bond forged through patience and care. One especially beloved gardener was said to have a nightingale that mimicked his humming perfectly, creating a duet so harmonious it drew visitors from miles away. There's a light-hearted tone in the tales about how this particular nightingale would sometimes sing off-key, deliberately, much to the gardener's mock chagrin, perhaps testing the limits of their companionship. The intertwining of human and bird lives extended to the timing of the breeding season itself. Gardeners timed certain garden maintenance tasks, like pruning or watering, to avoid disturbing nests during sensitive periods. This delicate choreography ensured the birds felt secure and unhurried, fostering a peaceful environment conducive to raising healthy chicks. An intriguing scholarly debate lingers about how much of this was learned from direct observation and how much was influenced by cultural symbolism. The nightingale held a special place in Persian literature and mysticism, often representing the longing soul or divine inspiration. Was the care given to the birds purely practical, or did it also carry a deeper spiritual meaning for the gardeners? The answer might be a bit of both. Beyond the nests, gardeners also paid attention to the diet of their nightingales during the breeding season. They knew that well-fed birds were healthier and sang better, so they supplied fresh insects, berries, and even drops of sweet pomegranate juice to supplement natural foraging. Feeding was done with delicate hands and soft voices to avoid startling the birds, emphasizing gentle trust. One particularly odd practice was the occasional offering of honey mixed with crushed rose petals. While the birds didn't sip this concoction directly, the scent was believed to invigorate their spirits and enhance their vocal quality. This might sound a little extravagant, but it reflects the holistic approach of Persian gardeners, who considered body, mind, and environment as interconnected in the art of bird training. You may find it interesting that the nesting period itself was seen as a time of renewal not just for the birds but for the garden community as a whole. Gardeners often use the quiet nesting phase for reflection, planning, and small celebrations of nature's resilience. The delicate process of nurturing life inspired poetry, painting, and even music compositions, creating a rich cultural tapestry around the humble nest. And so, as you step softly away from the orange blossom alcove, you carry with you the image of tiny nightingale chicks nestled in fragrant petals, surrounded by gardeners' gentle care and ancient rituals. It's a story not only of bird training, but of profound connection between humans, birds, flowers, and the rhythms of the natural world. Your thoughts drift with the scent of thyme and lavender, the soft rustling of leaves, and the whispered promise of new songs yet to come. The night is alive, and somewhere close, a nightingale prepares for its next melody. You follow the soft murmur of water along a narrow channel carved between fragrant rose bushes and slender cypress trees, feeling the gentle splash of irrigation that has kept Persian gardens lush for centuries. This water, you soon discover, isn't just any water. It's the lifeblood of these paradises and the secret ingredient in the nightingale's enchanting education. The gardener's mastery over water management was as much an art as their floral arrangements, and it played a surprising role in the training and well-being of their feathered protégés. Water in Persian gardens flows through a carefully designed system of channels called canets, which tap into underground aquifers and bring cool, pure water to the surface. As you trace the winding streams, you hear the soft plash of water droplets falling into basins and ponds, a gentle soundtrack that soothes both birds and humans alike. These soundscapes were no accident. Gardeners understood that the rhythmic, calm noise of flowing water had a tranquilizing effect, encouraging nightingales to sing more freely and rest more peacefully. Imagine sitting by one of these quiet pools at twilight, the sky a wash of deepening purple, with nightingales hidden among fragrant lilac bushes and jasmine vines. The gentle water sounds mingle with their melodious calls, weaving a sensory tapestry that calms nerves and fosters creativity. This aquatic ambience wasn't just for the birds. It was a conscious part of the whole garden's atmosphere, designed to comfort and inspire everyone present. The water channels themselves were often lined with stones smoothed by centuries of flow, some engraved with poetry or delicate patterns, blending human artistry with nature's rhythms. There's a poetic justice in how the steady, measured flow of water mirrors the measured patience needed to train such elusive singers. The garden becomes a symphony of sensory elements, flowers, scents, sounds, all orchestrated to support the nightingale's performance. You might be surprised to learn that the gardeners sometimes adjusted water flow deliberately during training sessions. A slightly louder or softer splash could catch a bird's attention, encouraging it to mimic the gentle rhythms or respond with a more elaborate trill. It's almost like a watery metronome, keeping time for the bird's vocal lessons. Historians still argue whether this water manipulation was a refined training technique or simply a happy accident born from the necessity of irrigation. Either way, it's clear that water and song were intertwined in the garden's delicate ecosystem. But the role of water extended beyond mere ambience. The birds themselves depended on it for more than just drinking. Persian gardeners observed that nightingales bathed frequently, using shallow pools or the mist from irrigation to keep their feathers in perfect condition. Bathing was not only hygienic but also stimulated the birds, refreshing them for the long nights of singing that defined their reputations. You might chuckle at the image of a tiny nightingale taking a splash bath, feathers ruffled and wings fluttering with joyous abandon. Gardeners took care to keep these bathing spots clean and accessible, often crafting small basins hidden among fragrant herbs like mint or lemon balm, adding a fresh scent that the birds seemed to enjoy. Sometimes, gentle sprays of water were used as a kind of encouragement or playful reward during training. Never harsh, just a light mist that startled the bird into a spirited song or call. This playful interaction between human and bird was a dance of mutual respect and affection. There's an amusing account in one Persian manuscript of a gardener who tried using a miniature water wheel to create a tinkling sound that seemed to delight one particularly shy nightingale. The bird apparently returned daily to investigate the curious contraption, inspiring the gardener to dream up even more creative water toys. You also learn that water features attracted more than just nightingales. They brought other birds and small animals into the garden's ecosystem, creating a rich chorus of background sounds that challenged and inspired the nightingales to diversify their melodies. The gardeners saw this diversity as beneficial, believing that the varied bird songs sharpened the nightingales' skills and enriched their repertoire. Yet, water management wasn't without challenges. The delicate balance between too much moisture and too little was a constant concern. Too much water risked flooding nests or drowning delicate flowers, while too little made the garden dry and lifeless, discouraging birds from lingering. Gardeners developed an intuitive sense for timing irrigation, often watering under the cover of night or at dawn to avoid disturbing the birds. One fascinating detail is the gardeners' use of water temperature. They sometimes cooled pools with ice brought from mountain springs in summer months, creating refreshing microclimates for the birds and plants alike. You can almost feel the cool mist on your skin as you imagine these frosty rituals, a surprising touch of luxury and care. The relationship between water and song echoes in Persian poetry, where flowing streams and nightingale melodies intertwine as symbols of life's beauty and sorrow. This literary backdrop perhaps influenced how gardeners approach their craft, seeing water and birdsong not just as practical elements, but as expressions of a deeper cosmic harmony. Historians debate how much these poetic ideals shaped real gardening practices versus how much they were romanticized after the fact. But the evidence of elaborate waterworks and careful acoustic design suggests that poetic sensibility and practical skill were closely linked. Interestingly, the presence of water also affected the flowers chosen around the nightingale training areas. Plants like lotus, water lilies, and fragrant reeds thrive near pools, adding visual beauty and unique scents that complemented the aquatic ambience. The gardeners balanced these choices carefully to maintain a garden that was as pleasant to the eye as it was to the ear and nose. You may find it charming that some gardeners cultivated small fish, like koi or goldfish, in garden pools, believing their movements stimulated a calming energy that extended to the birds. These tiny aquatic companions became part of the living orchestra, their subtle ripples and occasional splashes adding texture to the garden symphony. As you wander back along the water's edge, the gentle plashing mingling with distant nightingale songs, you sense how deeply intertwined life, water, and sound are in this ancient paradise. It's a reminder that sometimes the quietest elements, the flow of a stream, the drip of a fountain, can be the most powerful forces shaping nature's beauty. With your senses filled by the coolness of water and the promise of music, you prepare to move deeper into the garden's mysteries, curious about how the gardeners transformed flowers themselves into tools for teaching song. You step away from the gentle babble of water and into the heart of the Persian garden, where flowers are more than mere decoration. They're teachers, trainers, and companions to the nightingales. Here, you discover the remarkable ways Persian gardeners used blooms as instruments in their patient work to nurture the birds' songs. Flowers weren't just pretty faces. They were carefully selected and arranged for their scents, shapes, and colors, each contributing to the birds' education and comfort. The first thing you notice is how the gardeners prized fragrant flowers, especially those with subtle but persistent scents. The nightingale's keen sense of smell was well understood, even if it wasn't fully studied scientifically. Persian gardeners knew that certain flowers could soothe the birds, while others could energize or focus them. Roses, jasmine, and narcissus were favorites, each offering a unique aroma that influenced the mood and behavior of the birds. Imagine walking through a maze of rose bushes, their petals softly illuminated by dappled sunlight filtering through cypress leaves. You catch the delicate perfume of damask roses, a scent so rich it seems to wrap around you like a silken shawl. It's no accident that these roses were planted near the birds' nesting areas, encouraging calmness and encouraging the nightingales to sing clear, sustained notes. There's a charming story passed down through generations about a gardener who discovered that nightingales would respond more vividly when surrounded by freshly picked jasmine blossoms tied in small bundles. The sweet, heavy scent seemed to spark the birds' vocal energy, as if the flowers whispered a secret song only they could hear. Whether this was a precise botanical reaction or a bit of poetic fancy, gardeners carefully curated these aromatic bouquets and placed them strategically throughout the garden. Historians still debate how much the nightingale's reactions were due to scent alone versus the visual and tactile environment created by the flowers. But there's no doubt that the flowers contributed to the sensory richness of the training grounds. Colors, too, played a subtle role in the birds' world. Gardeners favored blooms in soft pinks, creamy whites, and gentle yellows, tones believed to be less startling to sensitive creatures like nightingales. Sharp reds and intense purples were often avoided in nesting areas, perhaps because these colors could disrupt the bird's delicate mood or attract unwanted attention from predators. You might find it amusing that some gardeners experimented with flower colors by crossbreeding varieties to achieve the perfect palette. Not for human fashion, but for bird psychology. These color choices extended to the garden furniture and structures as well, ensuring a harmonious visual environment that calmed the nightingales and encouraged them to focus on their vocal lessons. Another intriguing use of flowers involved their sounds, or rather, their interaction with the breeze. Certain grasses and blooms were planted to create soft, rustling noises when the wind passed through, mimicking or complementing the birds' songs. Gardeners understood that this gentle natural accompaniment could inspire nightingales to elaborate their melodies or hold a note longer. You can almost hear the faint rustle of tall reeds and slender lavender stalks brushing against one another as the breeze dances through the garden. This auditory texture formed an invisible backdrop, a companion to the birdsong, helping to steady the nightingale's performances in subtle ways. The shapes of flowers and plants mattered as well. Gardeners preferred blossoms with rounded, open petals that invited birds to perch and interact. Flowers like tulips, poppies, and magnolias provided comfortable landing spots or gentle hiding places, allowing nightingales to rest close to their teachers without feeling exposed. One gardener's journal describes a favorite flower, a creamy magnolia blossom, used as a sort of soft perch that encouraged shy birds to venture out and sing more confidently. The flower's broad petals cushioned tiny feet, and its mild scent reassured the birds that they were safe. Oddly enough, some flowers also played a role in the bird's diet during training. Certain blooms produced edible nectar or seeds that gardeners harvested and mixed into special feeds to reward the nightingales. This natural treat was part of a larger system of positive reinforcement that helped the birds associate singing with comfort and pleasure. There's a quirky note in one Persian manuscript about a gardener who claimed that nightingales preferred a particular type of wild violet, which supposedly gave their songs a sweeter tone. Modern scientists have yet to confirm this, but it adds a playful mystery to the floral repertoire. The gardener's flower arrangements were not static. Bouquets and beds changed with the seasons, ensuring a continuous cycle of fresh scents and colors to keep the birds engaged. Spring brought cherry blossoms and hyacinths. Summer invited lilacs and honeysuckle, while autumn offered chrysanthemums and marigolds, each phase nurturing different aspects of the nightingale's song and mood. You begin to appreciate the immense patience and sensitivity required to orchestrate such a living classroom. Gardeners monitored how birds reacted to each new bloom, adjusting plantings and layouts with care that sometimes rivaled the composer's attention to each note. Historians still argue whether Persian gardeners viewed flowers primarily as practical tools or as symbolic extensions of their spiritual beliefs. Many poets of the era linked floral beauty to divine harmony, suggesting that the gardener's work was as much a meditation as a training regimen. One particularly poetic verse speaks of the nightingale's song as the soul's perfume, intertwining flower and music in a metaphor that blurs the line between nature and art. It's tempting to think the gardeners shared this view, tending their blooms not just for function, but as part of a sacred dialogue between earth and sky. Sometimes flowers serve to mask less pleasant garden smells, or to deter pests without disturbing the birds. For example, strong herbs like rue or thyme were planted near nightingale nests, their pungent aroma protecting the delicate birds from insects without overpowering the sweeter floral scents. You might smile at the idea of tiny nightingales delicately balancing on aromatic herbs, seemingly aware of the gardener's subtle strategies to keep them comfortable and safe. The interplay of scent, color, texture, and sound creates a multisensory sanctuary where training becomes a gentle art rather than a strict discipline. At one point, the gardeners even experimented with flower essences, early forms of perfumes, applying diluted scents near training perches to stimulate the nightingale's senses. While results were mixed, this early exploration of aromatherapy reveals how deeply the connection between flowers and birdsong was felt. As you continue your stroll, you encounter an ancient stone basin filled with floating rose petals and jasmine buds, its surface shimmering in the afternoon sun. This simple, fragrant pool embodies the heart of the Persian garden's philosophy. Beauty and function united, teaching nightingales not just to sing, but to live within a world of harmony. In this floral sanctuary, you sense a profound respect for the subtle, often overlooked ways that nature's smallest details can shape the grandest expressions of art, like the nightingale's unforgettable song. You continue your gentle exploration of the Persian garden, where the subtle art of nightingale training unfolds further. Now you arrive at a quieter, more contemplative corner, a place where water trickles softly over stone and shaded niches hold delicate wooden cages and small platforms. This is where the gardeners introduced an unusual practice, mimicking nightingale songs using carefully crafted instruments and human whistles. It might sound like a curious distraction, but it was an essential part of teaching the birds. You might smile, imagining patient gardeners sitting cross-legged on plush rugs, whistling soft, simple melodies into the garden air as a kind of call-and response with their feathered pupils. These melodies were designed not to overpower, but to guide the nightingales, gently encouraging them to try new notes and extend their vocal range. The use of human whistling and mimicry was far from a modern invention. Persian culture has a long tradition of appreciating the human voice as an instrument, especially in poetry and music. Gardeners, many of whom were also skilled musicians or poets, saw a natural link between their art and the bird songs. By modeling patterns and rhythms, they helped nightingales learn structure without the need for harsh correction. Historians still debate how much the birds genuinely learned from this human interaction, but accounts from travelers and poets alike praise the results. Some even believe the nightingales came to recognize individual gardeners by their unique whistles, responding with increasingly complex melodies in return. Alongside whistling, gardeners sometimes use small reed instruments designed to mimic bird calls. These simple flutes and pipes were played quietly and slowly, blending with the natural garden sounds. The intent was to create a gentle soundscape that inspired the birds rather than startling them. Interestingly, this practice may have contributed to the evolution of Persian classical music, which often incorporates melodic ornamentation resembling birdsong. Some scholars argue that the nightingale's influence on human music is as old as the gardens themselves, blurring the line between teacher and student. As you listen to the imagined soundscape, you notice how the human voice's softness, full of breath and slight imperfections, might have provided a comforting model for young nightingales struggling to find their own voice. It's a reminder that teaching is often a shared journey, one that requires patience and empathy. The gardener's mimicry also included subtle gestures and body language. Sometimes, they would imitate the posture or fluttering movements of the birds, signaling when to start or pause a song. This form of nonverbal communication helped build trust and understanding, creating an almost theatrical interaction that brought the garden to life. You may find it amusing that some gardeners became famous for their bird talk, winning quiet competitions among their peers to see who could best imitate the nightingale's trill or warble. These contests were good-natured and playful, but also served a serious purpose, improving the trainer's skills and deepening the human-bird connection. In certain garden workshops, apprentices learned these mimicry techniques as part of a broader education in horticulture, poetry, and music. The nightingale training was never just about the bird. It was a holistic art form blending nature, culture, and science. There's a charming account in an old Persian manuscript describing a gardener whose whistle was so captivating that passing nightingales would stop mid-flight to listen. Whether entirely true or a bit of poetic license, the story illustrates the deep reverence gardeners held for the bird's voice and their own role in nurturing it. Another surprising aspect was the role of nighttime training sessions. Though nightingales are largely crepuscular singers, some gardeners would softly whistle or play their instruments at dusk, encouraging the birds to extend their singing hours or learn new nocturnal songs. This practice also tied into Persian beliefs about the mystical qualities of night and moonlight. Gardeners thought that the quiet, cool hours after sunset offered a unique atmosphere for delicate learning, when the world's noises softened and the nightingale's voice could truly shine. Of course, the success of these mimicry techniques depended greatly on the individual birds' temperaments. Some nightingales were eager students, quickly picking up melodies and responding with enthusiasm. Others were shy or stubborn, requiring extra patience and gentler coaxing. Gardeners adapted accordingly, tailoring their whistles and instruments to suit each bird's personality. It's fascinating to imagine these moments of quiet collaboration, where human and bird met in mutual understanding without words. Historians still argue whether these training methods significantly changed the nightingale's natural songs or merely enhanced what the birds would have sung anyway. Some purists suggest that human influence could have altered the birds' calls, while others see it as a harmonious partnership. You might chuckle at the thought that some nightingales, known for their stubbornness, may have deliberately ignored the gardener's melodies, choosing instead to improvise and assert their independence. After all, every great artist needs a little rebellious streak. The mimicry also served a social function. When Persian nobility or poets visited the gardens, gardeners would demonstrate their trained nightingales' repertoires, sometimes even competing to see which bird could best echo the human whistles. These performances weren't just entertainment. They were a testament to the gardener's skill and the cultural importance of the garden itself. The Nightingale Song was a living poem a fragile yet powerful symbol of beauty and harmony between man and nature. You may be surprised to learn that in some gardens, gardeners also taught nightingales to mimic certain words or phrases, albeit in a very rudimentary form. While not true language, these vocal experiments added an extra layer of fascination and delight for visitors. Some scholars speculate that this early form of vocal mimicry may have inspired later traditions of talking birds in Persian folklore, where nightingales appear as magical messengers or wise companions. As the sun dips lower, casting long shadows over the garden, you realize that the human voice, soft, imperfect, and deeply connected to emotion, was as vital a tool as flowers or water in shaping the nightingale's song. This gentle interplay between human and bird, between art and nature, is what makes the Persian garden such a unique and enchanting space. It's a reminder that teaching and learning often happen in the quietest moments, where patience and kindness blossom alongside beauty. You find yourself drifting deeper into the garden's magic, where the art of training nightingales reveals even more fascinating layers. Now you explore the gardener's use of scent, not just visual beauty or sound, but the gentle power of fragrance, to shape the nightingale's experience and influence their singing. It's a softer, more subtle form of training, but no less essential in this delicate dance of nature and nurture. Imagine walking slowly beneath arches heavy with jasmine and rose, the air thick with sweet perfumes that seem to carry their own song. The gardeners believed that these scents could calm the nightingales, soothe their nerves, and even inspire more intricate vocalizations. You might not think smell and music would mix so naturally, but in these ancient Persian gardens, they were inseparable. The tradition of using aromatic flowers alongside nightingale training is well documented in Persian poetry and garden manuals. Scent was considered a language in itself, a way to speak to the birds without words. Gardeners carefully arranged clusters of fragrant blossoms near the bird cages or perches, allowing the scents to mingle with the morning mist or the cool evening air. Historians still debate exactly how much these scents affected the nightingale's singing. Some suggest that the fragrances triggered emotional responses in the birds, while others think the smells helped the birds feel safer and more relaxed, which naturally led to more confident songs. You might smile imagining a nightingale nestled near a bed of damask roses, its chest rising and falling to the rhythm of a soft breeze, carrying rosewater and musk. The bird's trill seems to harmonize with the scent itself, a symphony of senses that envelopes the whole garden. Certain flowers were prized above others for their particular effects. Jasmine, for example, was believed to promote joyful, lively songs, while violet was associated with gentleness and melancholy melodies. Gardeners knew to rotate these floral companions with the seasons to keep the birds inspired year-round. Interestingly, some gardeners experimented with mixing scents to create unique bouquets specifically tailored to individual nightingales. They observed that just as people have favorite perfumes, birds seem to respond better to certain combinations, becoming more vocal and expressive. This practice connects closely to the broader Persian love for sensory harmony in gardens, where visual beauty, scent, sound, and even taste from edible plants combine to create a perfect retreat. The garden was not just a place of beauty, but a living poem, each element carefully chosen to complement the others. You may find it amusing to think that gardeners kept fragrance journals, noting how particular flower arrangements affected different birds over time. These records were part science, part art, and part superstition, revealing the complex relationship between humans and nature in this tradition. One curious story tells of a gardener who accidentally spilled saffron petals near a nightingale's perch. The bird's song reportedly changed that day, becoming richer and more intricate. Whether this was a coincidence or a true sensory influence remains unclear, but it adds a charming touch of serendipity to the garden's lore. The use of scent wasn't limited to flowers alone. Gardeners also burned sweet-smelling herbs and resins, like sandalwood and frankincense, during training sessions to create an atmosphere of calm and reverence. This ritualistic aspect may have helped establish a routine, signaling to the nightingales that it was time to sing and learn. You might be surprised to learn that some scholars think this ritual use of incense had spiritual significance as well, linking the Nightingale's song to mystical ideas of the soul's journey and divine inspiration. The garden, in this view, became a sacred space where nature and spirit intertwined. As you breathe in the imagined scent of the garden, you realize that the gardeners were masters not only of plants and music, but of atmosphere. They crafted a multi-sensory experience designed to nurture both bird and human soul, a gentle invitation to pause, listen, and dream. The subtle use of scent also had a practical side. Certain fragrances were believed to keep pests away, protecting both flowers and birds. Gardeners had to balance beauty with health, ensuring the environment remained safe for their prized nightingales. Historians still argue about how much of this scent practice was based on observation and how much on mystical tradition. Some think that the elaborate floral symbolism in Persian gardens reflects a deeper philosophical worldview, where every scent and color carried hidden meaning. You might chuckle imagining gardeners explaining to their apprentices that a nightingale's mood could depend on whether it smelled jasmine or mint that morning, almost like a birdie mood ring. This whimsical thought highlights the human tendency to find patterns and meaning in nature's subtle cues. The connection between scent and song also echoes in Persian poetry, where nightingales often symbolize passionate lovers drawn to the rose's perfume. This poetic metaphor hints at the real-world bond between the fragrant garden and the nightingale's melody. You start to appreciate that the nightingale's song was never just a natural instinct, but a carefully cultivated expression, shaped by flowers, water, music, and now scent. This holistic approach to training reveals a profound respect for the complexity of life and art. Even the timing of scent release mattered. Gardeners noted that early morning and late afternoon were the best moments for introducing certain fragrances, aligning with the nightingale's natural singing rhythms and daily cycles. This attention to detail suggests that Persian gardeners had an intuitive understanding of ecology and animal behavior long before modern science put names to these ideas. They were early practitioners of what we might call environmental enrichment today. You might find it funny to picture a gardener carefully sniffing a bouquet of flowers, making notes on which scents seem to produce the most inspired singing, almost like a conductor tuning an orchestra by smell instead of sound. There's also evidence that the practice of scent training spread beyond nightingales to other birds, and even to human meditation and healing rituals, illustrating the interconnectedness of these cultural traditions. In the end, you realize that scent was more than just a training tool. It was part of the garden's soul, an invisible thread weaving together all the senses and stories into a living, breathing masterpiece. You're wandering deeper into the lush world of Persian gardens, where the story of nightingale training takes another intriguing twist. This time, the focus shifts to the gardeners themselves, not just as caretakers, but as artists, scientists, and even subtle psychologists who carefully observe their feathered pupils. Their patience and devotion reveal a fascinating dynamic of trust and understanding between human and bird that feels surprisingly modern. Picture the gardener at dawn, stepping quietly through dew-soaked paths, dressed simply but with an air of calm authority. They carry no whistles or harsh commands, only soft hands and a watchful eye. You realize that this gentle approach was crucial. Nightingales respond poorly to stress or sudden movements, so every interaction had to be slow and deliberate. These gardeners developed a kind of bird whispering technique, speaking softly and moving with a rhythm that mimicked the natural environment. They weren't training soldiers, but rather coaxing music from a living soul, requiring empathy more than dominance. The long hours spent in the garden were less about control and more about building a relationship, a quiet partnership. It's curious to think that while much of the world saw birds as mere animals or even pests, these Persian gardeners saw them as collaborators in creating beauty. This attitude reflects a broader cultural respect for nature, where humans and animals shared an unspoken bond. Historians still argue whether this careful observation led to early forms of animal behavior science. Some say the gardener's notes and poems hint at an empirical approach, recording what flower scents inspired which songs, or how changes in light affected the bird's mood. Others believe the practice was rooted more in poetic imagination and spiritual connection. You can almost hear the gardener's thoughts as they watch a nightingale struggle with a new tune, patient, gentle, and ready to adjust the environment or timing to encourage success. It's a collaboration that required not just knowledge, but humility. One charming detail is that gardeners often name their favorite nightingales, giving them personalities and histories much like human companions. You might chuckle picturing a gardener whispering the name Shirin or Zurif, while coaxing a particularly difficult melody, as if the bird were a fellow artist rather than a pet. This personalized attention extended to diet as well. Gardeners knew that nutrition impacted song quality, so they provided specific berries, seeds, and even honey mixtures thought to improve vocal strength and stamina. These special feeds were given like treats after successful singing sessions, reinforcing the connection between effort and reward. You might find it funny that some gardeners believed nightingales could understand gratitude, responding to kind words and gentle touches with more enthusiastic singing. While modern science might raise eyebrows at such claims, it shows how deep this bond could become. The social aspect of training is also fascinating. Nightingales are naturally solitary singers, but in the garden, they were sometimes grouped in choirs to encourage friendly competition and variety in song. Gardeners observed how a spirited duet or a sudden call-in response could inspire new melodies and keep the birds engaged. Interestingly, some gardeners created small mirrors placed near perches, allowing nightingales to see their reflections. The theory was that birds might learn to mimic or improve their song when they felt watched by a fellow singer. Historians debate whether this practice was more for human amusement or a genuine training method. You might imagine the gardener chuckling as a nightingale flutters at its reflection, confused but curious, a reminder that even in these ancient practices, there was room for playfulness and surprise. There's also evidence that gardeners tailored training schedules to individual birds' personalities and energy cycles, showing remarkable intuition. Some nightingales preferred early morning songs, while others were nighttime crooners. The gardener's role was to tune into these rhythms and adapt accordingly. This personalized training contrasts with the rigid, repetitive methods often associated with animal training, reflecting a uniquely gentle philosophy. It's a reminder that sometimes patience and respect achieve more than force. You learn that gardeners kept detailed journals, recording each bird's progress, quirks, and preferences. These writings combined observation with poetry, blurring the lines between science and art. For them, every nightingale was a unique story unfolding in song. You might smile at the idea that gardeners saw themselves as composers or conductors, guiding the natural music of the garden without ever trying to dominate it. Their role was less about teaching and more about listening. In fact, the relationship between gardener and nightingale sometimes became so close that the birds recognized their caretakers' voices and responded with special songs. This mutual recognition suggests a surprising level of emotional connection. Some gardeners were known to have favorite birds that traveled with them or were featured in special garden events. These prized nightingales became local celebrities, their songs inspiring poems, paintings, and even royal commissions. Historians still debate whether this close bond was purely practical or had spiritual undertones, connecting to Persian beliefs about harmony between humans, animals, and the divine. The nightingale song was often seen as a bridge between earthly beauty and heavenly inspiration. You might find it amusing that gardeners occasionally argued about whose nightingale sang best, turning the quiet garden into a lively, but gentle, arena of friendly competition. This playful rivalry encouraged continual refinement in training techniques, pushing gardeners to discover new ways to inspire and nurture their birds. In your mind's eye, you see a gardener resting after a long day, surrounded by blooming roses and the evening chorus of nightingales, feeling a quiet pride in this delicate partnership. It's a moment of peace born from years of attentive care and shared music. Ultimately, the story of the Persian gardener reveals a timeless truth, that patience, kindness, and attentive presence can create beauty in the most unexpected places. In the delicate voice of a nightingale, you hear the echo of this ancient, gentle artistry. You find yourself now at the final stretch of this winding path through the fragrant, flower-dappled Persian garden. a place where human patience met the song of nightingales in a quiet dance that has lasted centuries. As the sun dips low and shadows lengthen across the marble fountains and clipped hedges, the story of these feathered friends and their gardeners begins to soften into a gentle conclusion, inviting you to linger in this world just a little longer. By now, you understand how the nightingale song was never merely a natural phenomenon to the Persians. Instead, it was an art form to be shaped, cherished, and woven into the daily life of the garden, reflecting deeper cultural values of beauty, harmony, and subtlety. You picture the gardeners at twilight, their figures bathed in soft orange light, checking on their prized singers, offering a last handful of fragrant petals or a drop of honeyed water as a final reward for the day. You realize that this was not a hurried or mechanical process. Instead, it was a slow, almost ritualistic practice where the rhythm of the garden, the changing seasons, and the moods of the birds intertwined like the intricate patterns on a Persian carpet. The gardeners knew when to push and when to rest, how to balance structure with freedom, a delicate balance that resonates with anyone who has tried to nurture creativity, whether in art, music, or life itself. Historians still debate the exact extent to which these gardening and training practices influenced broader Persian society. Some argue that the lessons learned in these quiet gardens trickled up to shape courtly culture and poetry, while others see them as more contained, intimate experiments in human-animal interaction. Either way, the nightingale song became a symbol of yearning and beauty that echoed beyond garden walls into the hearts of poets and lovers. You might smile remembering the quirky details from earlier, the gardeners naming their birds, the mirror experiments, or the carefully crafted diets. Small acts that hint at a profound affection and respect for these wild, yet willing collaborators. It's easy to forget, in a world of instant gratification, just how much slow, steady care it took to cultivate such delicate music. In a way, this story also gently reminds you of something modern. That true artistry, whether with birds or any other medium, requires time, attention, and empathy, qualities too often rushed in today's fast-paced world. The Persian gardeners modeled a quiet, enduring patience, accepting imperfection and celebrating small progress, a message as soothing as the nightingale song itself. You imagine how this tradition might have influenced the design of Persian gardens, where every plant and flower was chosen not just for beauty, but for the way it complemented the nightingale's melodies. Jasmine for fragrance, roses for color, and trees for shade and shelter. These gardens were living symphonies, where sound, scent, and sight combined into a sensory experience that calmed the mind and lifted the spirit. This sensory harmony extended even to the choice of water features. The gentle burble of fountains was said to encourage birds to sing more freely, adding a natural accompaniment to their songs. You can almost hear that mingling of sounds, the soft splash of water, the rustle of leaves, and the nightingale's clear notes weaving through the cool evening air. You might find it soothing to think that the nightingale song was more than just a performance. It was a kind of conversation between bird and gardener, nature and culture, earth and sky. A conversation that transcended words and connected deeply to the human experience of beauty and longing. Some scholars propose that these gardens and their birds also played a role in Persian spirituality. The nightingale song was often linked to mystical ideas of love and divine connection, inspiring Sufi poets like Rumi and Hafez. Though historians still argue the extent of this influence, it's clear that the nightingale became a powerful symbol of the soul's journey, singing of both joy and sorrow. You feel the weight of this symbolism as you imagine the gardener sitting quietly beneath a tree, the air thick with scent and song, contemplating not just the bird's music, but the mysteries it might hold. There's a deep, timeless calm in this image, a reminder that sometimes the simplest sounds can carry the greatest meaning. It's worth noting, too, that the practice of training nightingales was not static. Over centuries, gardeners adapted their methods, responding to changing tastes, climates, and cultural shifts. The tradition evolved, but always maintained that core respect for the bird's natural gifts and spirit. You might chuckle recalling the small human foibles revealed in the gardener's journals. Moments of frustration when a bird refused to sing, or playful debates about which flower scent best inspired melody. These glimpses remind you that behind the serene surface of the garden were real people, with quirks and humor, dedicating their lives to an unusual but beautiful craft. As the story winds down, you appreciate how this ancient practice offers a unique lens on human creativity and connection with nature. It's a story of gentle persistence and joyful discovery, a reminder that sometimes the most meaningful art comes from listening carefully and patiently, rather than rushing or forcing. You might even think about your own life and the nightingales you tend to, whether projects, relationships, or personal growth, and how the Persian gardener's approach could inspire a softer, more mindful way forward. Before you let your thoughts drift fully away, it's comforting to know that while these gardens may have faded or changed over the centuries, the legacy of their nightingales lives on. Their songs, captured in poetry and memory, continue to echo through time, inviting each new listener to slow down, breathe, and listen deeply. And now, as your eyes grow heavy and the soft hum of the night settles around you, imagine yourself in that quiet garden one last time, surrounded by the scent of flowers, the gentle splash of water, and the tender, haunting song of a nightingale trained by patient hands long ago. You feel the calm seep into your bones, a lullaby from another time and place, carrying you gently toward rest. The garden and its songs become part of your dreams, a peaceful world where beauty and patience reign. As the night deepens and your breathing slows, the garden's soft whispers begin to fade into a delicate hush. Imagine the petals you once saw now resting quietly, their fragrances mingling faintly with the cool evening air. The nightingale's song, once clear and bright, has become a tender murmur, like a lullaby meant just for you. There is no rush here, no urgent call to wakefulness. Instead, you feel a gentle invitation to let go of busy thoughts, of restless plans, and simply be. The quiet rhythms of the garden teach a soothing lesson. That beauty unfolds in its own time, and peace comes when we listen closely, patiently. You may feel your eyelids grow heavier, your muscles relax, and a soft warmth spread through your chest. That warmth is the echo of centuries-old care, a human touch reaching across time to cradle your mind in calm. It's a reminder that even in the smallest, quietest moments, like training a nightingale with a flower scent, there is magic, connection, and grace. So, let your thoughts drift like petals on a gentle breeze, carrying you softly towards sleep. The garden will stay with you, a secret world of song and scent, holding you safe until morning's light. Good night and sweet dreams.